So what does this give us, right? So all this is really neat historical stuff. It's really cool to help us out on Jeopardy. So what does this give us? It gives us dualism, right? So you can see here that what is dualism? It's an instance of opposition or contrast between two concepts or two aspects of something. So how do we see dualism in the Victorian age, right? Well, when people are sitting around, they look really nice, especially these men and these women. They're really dressed up, right? Well, what percent of the women are prostitutes? You got to have the men going out there sleeping with these prostitutes, otherwise they wouldn't be in business. You have people digging up cadavers, corpses, so surgeons can practice on them. This is just mind-boggling, right? It's also during this time in 1888 where we have Jack the Ripper. Everybody's familiar with Jack the Ripper, right? This is during this time too. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that was published just a few years before Jack the Ripper, right? So we have all these concepts here bubbling around for us. Now, this idea of dualism or duality, we see, and it just, boom, this is all what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is all about. Something on the surface, but underneath, right? Just like we've seen with the history there, but just underneath, something very different opposing that, right? Now, if you think about it, this idea of dualism, duality, we still have this with us today, and if not for this idea, which was born during this time and recorded not only by authors like Robert Louis Stevenson, but also Oscar Wilde, with his play, The Importance of Being Earnest. The idea of earnest itself, on its own, guys, is almost becomes an emblem for the Victorian Age, earnestness. So what Oscar Wilde is going to do is he's going to embrace satire. So what satire is, that is not just making fun of something, right? Making people laugh, but you're trying to raise attention and awareness in hopes of affecting social change. For example, a primary vehicle for satire today is Saturday Night Live, right? So it's not only funny, they're little skits, but what they're trying to do is make people laugh and then stop and go, ooh, I just laughed at something that's really not that funny. I wonder why that was. Oh, maybe I should affect some changes in my life or my voting patterns so we can make America a better place, right? Also, Oscar Wilde wrote a novel, you might have read it, called The Portrait of Dorian Gray, which is about a man who has a portrait of himself made. And then, as he goes through life, he behaves very, very badly. He's a really big sinner, and so his countenance stays the same. He ages, it stays the same, but his portrait changes, right? So that idea, again, of dualism, duality, we see again. How do we see it today? Well, if you like comic books or the movies that spin out of comic books, such as Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, right? All these superheroes where they have one thing on the surface, but behind what do they have? A contrast, right? This is born during this time, during the Victorian Age. The idea, like we saw before, thanks to Daniel Poole in his book, What Jane Austen Ate and Charles Dickens Knew, right? We're putting one thing on the surface, like these gentlemen here, but something underneath it very different. Prostitution, widespread. Venereal disease, all over the place. Digging up corpses to practice for surgeons. Wow, this is really, really exciting. Now, as we start to move into the Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one thing to be on the lookout for is how far we have moved away from the bucolic ideal that we started with in Romanticism. Now we're in an urban setting, right? Crowded city streets. And as you run thing, right, flip back through the pages of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and you will not find a single tree. Wow, not a single tree, an urban novel. So One of the things to look for is the contrasts between these two periods, realism, where we started, and romanticism, how they've changed, and how these changes affect social life. Wow. So again, some of the things that we'll be talking about and looking at in Strange Case of Dr. Ella Misride, as well as moving forward with the importance of being earnest with Oscar Wilde, is dualism, that concept of duality, which is still with us today. So I always get really excited with literature because it's the intertwining, it's almost like weaving a tapestry of different elements. There's psychology, sociology, philosophy, religion, as well as the literature itself. Everything is woven together to give us this wonderful tapestry of religion, of literature. So as we go through and we read literature, it's not just words on a page, it's a living fabric that we get to dive into. So I'm really excited about the content as we move into this week. Hope you are too. So thanks, guys.